Let's be brutally honest here. Every man has desires, every man has fantasies. And some of those fantasies, they're not the ones he'll casually admit over dinner or even during pillow talk. In fact, some of the things that really turn him on, the ones that make his heart beat faster and his body ache with curiosity, are the very things he's least likely to say out loud. Not because he doesn't want them, not because he doesn't think about them, but because he's terrified of how you'll see him if he does. That's the funny paradox of men's on the outside. We look confident, bold, even shameless at times. But inside, when it comes to vulnerability in the bedroom, a man's deepest desires often stay locked away. Why? Because rejection in that space is crushing. He's afraid you'll laugh. He's afraid you'll judge. He's afraid you'll see him differently, not as strong and masculine, but as strange, needy, or even weak. So he plays it safe, sticks to the script, and buries the fantasies that actually light him up inside. But here's where the magic happens when you, as a woman, create the space for him to feel safe, to feel free, to feel like he can show his wild side without judgment. That's when intimacy transforms. That's when sex stops being routine and starts becoming unforgettable. Because suddenly, you're not just his lover, you're his confidant, his safe place, the one person who gets to see the side of him the rest of the world never will. And trust me, that's powerful. So today, I want to open that door for you. I want to walk you through 6 kinky things men secretly want to try in bed, but are too shy to ask for. These aren't necessarily things every man wants, but they are common, deeply human fantasies that many men carry quietly in their heads. And I'm going to show you not just what they are, but why they matter, why they go deeper than the physical act, and what it says about his need for connection, vulnerability, and passion. And before we dive in, I need you to remember something critical. None of this is about becoming someone you're not. It's not about ticking boxes or doing things that make you uncomfortable. It's about awareness. It's about understanding what's going on in his head, and then deciding with confidence which doors you want to open and which ones you don't. Because intimacy isn't about saying yes to everything. It's about being brave enough to explore and safe enough to communicate. All right, let's get into the first one. The first secret fantasy a lot of men carry is being dominated. Now, here's the funny thing. Men are conditioned to always be in control, to lead, to make the first move, to take responsibility for driving things forward. And many of them genuinely enjoy that role. But secretly, a lot of men fantasize about what it would feel like to let go, to surrender, to have a woman take control and lead them into pleasure. Not forever, not as a lifestyle, but just for moments where they don't have to be the strong one. What does this look like? It might be you taking charge physically, pinning him down, climbing on top, holding his wrists. It might be you giving the instructions, telling him where to touch, when to stop, when to wait. It might be as simple as blindfolding him, so he can't anticipate what comes next. To him, it's not just about the act, it's about release. It's about trust. It's about the thrill of surrendering control to a woman who knows what she wants. And when you step into that role, even playfully, you give him an experience he rarely gets anywhere else. The second fantasy, praise and verbal affirmation. You'd be surprised how many men secretly crave hearing exactly how much their woman is enjoying them. They want to hear the moans, the whispers, the "God, you feel so good" confessions. Why? Because for a man, arousal is deeply tied to validation. He doesn't just want to give you pleasure, he wants to know he's giving you pleasure. And when you tell him without holding back that he's driving you wild, flips a switch in him. But most men won't ask for it. They're too shy to say, "Hey, could you tell me I'm doing a good job?" Because it sounds insecure. So instead, they silently hope you'll do it naturally. And when you do, he lights up. He feels like a king. He feels desired, powerful, connected. Praise during intimacy is a kink, not because it's strange, but because it goes to the core of his masculine identity. He wants to feel like he's your man, the one who can take you places no one else can, the third role play. Now, I know role play can sound cheesy, like something out of a bad rom-com, but here's the truth. Role play is one of the safest ways for men to explore hidden parts of themselves. It allows him to step outside his everyday identity, outside the box he's been put in, and try on a different persona. Maybe he fantasizes about being the teacher, the stranger, the boss, the firefighter. It's not that he literally wants those scenarios in real life. It's that role play allows him to experience variety, novelty, and intensity in a way that feels exciting but safe. Here's the thing most women miss when a man suggests role play. What he's really saying is, I want to escape with you. He doesn't just want a different body, he wants a different world. And if you're willing to step into that world with him, to suspend reality for an hour and let your imaginations run wild, you give him something incredibly rare, the freedom to explore without fear. The fourth, a taste of risk. For many men, the idea of being caught, of intimacy that feels a little dangerous, lights a fire in their fantasies. This doesn't mean doing anything reckless or unsafe, but the thrill of being in a place where you could get caught, of sneaking a kiss or touching under the table, of having sex somewhere outside the bedroom where the adrenaline is pumping, that taps into something primal. It makes the experience unforgettable because it feels bold, daring, alive. Why is this so powerful? Because men are wired to chase adventure. When you combine adventure with intimacy, you give him a double hit of dopamine, excitement, and connection all at once. And when he looks back, he won't just remember the sex, he'll remember the adrenaline, the rush, the electricity of sharing that secret with you. That's 4 of the 6. And already you can start to see the pattern. These aren't just kinky ideas, they're doorways into deeper emotional needs. The desire to surrender control is really about trust. The craving for praise is really about validation. Role play is really about freedom. Risk is really about adventure. And when you understand those deeper needs, you stop seeing these fantasies as weird or intimidating, and you start seeing them as opportunities to bond, to connect, to give him something he can't get anywhere else. We've got 2 more to go. And these last 2 are the ones that almost every man has thought about at some point, but would never dare to say out loud. But we've already talked about 4 powerful fantasies men sacredly carry: domination, praise, role play, and risk. But here's the thing, you haven't even heard the juiciest ones yet, because the last 2, these are the ones that almost every man has thought about, replayed in his head during those quiet moments, but would never have the courage to bring up. Not because they're extreme, but because they make him feel exposed, vulnerable. And if you can understand these last 2, you'll unlock a level of connection with him that most women never reach. The 5th kinky thing men secretly want is mutual exploration of taboos. Now, when I say taboo, I don't necessarily mean something outrageous or unsafe. I mean the things that society has labeled as naughty, dirty, or off limits. It could be something as simple as talking dirty in bed, or as bold as experimenting with toys, watching something together, or exploring a new sensation. Why do men crave this? Because for most of their lives, men have been told that sexual curiosity is shameful. They've been taught to keep their desires hidden, to bury anything that doesn't look normal. So when a woman leans in and says, let's try this together, it's not just about the act, it's about permission. It's about him finally feeling free to express without shame. When you open that door, you're not just indulging a kink, you're giving him the gift of acceptance. And that, to a man, is intoxicating. Here's the deeper layer taboos create intensity. When you cross a line together, even a small one, it bonds you. It becomes your secret, your shared adventure. And every time he thinks about it, he doesn't just think about the thrill. He thinks about you, the woman who made him feel brave enough to go there. The 6th and final secret fantasy, being desired unapologetically. Now you might think, wait, that doesn't sound kinky at all. But let me tell you, this is one of the rawest, most powerful turn-ons for a man. What men secretly fantasize about over and over is the experience of being completely wanted. Not just accepted, not just tolerated, wanted, desired, consumed. Imagine what it feels like for him when you initiate, when you grab him and pull him closer, when you make the first move with fire in your eyes, when you let your body language scream, I need you right now. For a man, that's heaven, because so often he's the one expected to chase, to initiate, to prove himself. And while he doesn't mind playing that role, what he secretly aches for is the reversal, for you to claim him, to make him feel irresistible. And let me tell you why that's so powerful. Men may look confident, but underneath, almost every man wonders, am I enough? Am I attractive? Does she really want me? Or is she just giving in? When you show him that you do want him, passionately and unapologetically, you answer that fear. You give him certainty. And in that certainty, he feels safe enough to give you everything, his body, his energy, his trust, his devotion. So we've gone through the 6 domination, praise, role play, risk, taboos, and unapologetic desire. But here's where I want you to lean in, because this is the part most people miss. None of these are really about the surface act. They're about the deeper psychological need beneath them. A man doesn't want to be dominated because he wants to lose himself in power games. He wants to feel safe to surrender. He doesn't want praise because he's needy. He wants to feel like he's your hero. He doesn't want role play because he's bored. He wants freedom. He doesn't want risk because he's reckless. He wants excitement. He doesn't want taboos because he's twisted. He wants permission. And he doesn't want to be desired just because of ego. He wants reassurance that he's enough. When you understand that, suddenly these fantasies stop being intimidating and start being opportunities for intimacy, trust, and connection on a deeper level. Because when a man feels he can explore these things with you without judgment, without fear, without shame, you become the one woman he can't get enough of. Now let's talk about the how, because it's one thing to know these 6 fantasies exist. It's another thing entirely to actually explore them in a way that feels natural, safe, and exciting for both of you. This is where so many couples stumble. They either ignore the subject altogether, which leads to boredom and disconnection, or they jump into it without communication, which leads to discomfort, awkwardness, or even resentment. So how do you actually do this, right? That's where the 5 key points come in. These are the guiding principles that turn kinky curiosity into real, lasting intimacy. They're not rules, but mindsets, ways of approaching this exploration that make it exciting instead of intimidating. And if you practice them, not only will you unlock his secret desires, but you'll also deepen the bond between you in ways you never imagined. The first point is communication. And no, I don't mean having a formal kink negotiation like you're signing a contract. I mean creating a culture of openness in your relationship where nothing is off limits to talk about. You don't have to dive straight into specifics. It can be as simple as asking, what's something you've always been curious to try? Or what turns you on that we haven't done yet? The goal isn't to force him to spill everything in one night. It's to make it clear that curiosity is welcome, not shameful. That with you, he can say anything without fear of being judged. The second point is pacing. Just because you've learned these 6 fantasies doesn't mean you need to tick them off like a checklist. Exploration works best when it's gradual. You dip your toe in, see how it feels, then go further if it excites you both. For example, domination doesn't have to mean handcuffs on day 1. It can start with something as small as you giving him a playful order or holding eye contact as you take control. Pacing ensures that both of you stay comfortable, and comfort is the foundation of great sex. The third point is reciprocity. Remember, intimacy is not a one-way street. If you're exploring his fantasies, he should also be curious about yours. This isn't about you becoming his fantasy machine. It's about creating a dynamic where both of you feel free to express and experiment. In fact, the more you share your own secret desires, the easier it becomes for him to share his. That reciprocity turns exploration into a shared journey instead of a performance. The fourth point is playfulness. So many couples put pressure on sex to be perfect, serious, or cinematic, but the truth is intimacy is supposed to be fun, supposed to make you laugh sometimes, to be messy, awkward, and surprising. When you approach these kinks with a sense of playfulness instead of pressure, you remove the fear of failure. You create space for spontaneity, for creativity, for joy, and that makes everything sexier. And the fifth and final point, trust. At the core of every fantasy, every desire, every kink is the need to feel safe. If he doesn't trust you, he won't open up. If you don't trust him, you won't relax. Trust is the soil from which passion grows. And the more you nurture it by being honest, by respecting boundaries, by honoring each other's comfort levels, the more freedom you both have to go deeper, darker, wilder, sweeter. So there you have it, the 6 fantasies men secretly crave, and the 5 points to exploring them in a way that strengthens your intimacy instead of straining it. But here's the truth, this is just the beginning, because the real magic isn't in knowing the list, it's in how you live it. Now let's take this deeper, because hearing these 6 fantasies and the 5 points of exploration is exciting, but where the real transformation happens is when you know how to live them. Otherwise, it just becomes interesting information that never leaves your head, and intimacy doesn't change because of what we know, it changes because of what we do. So let's expand these 5 points with real examples, with the psychology behind them, so you know exactly how to turn this into action. Let's start with communication. I said it's the foundation, and I meant it. Think about it, so many couples avoid these conversations because they're afraid it'll feel awkward, or worse, that it'll expose a gap between them. So what do? They stay silent, they keep it safe, but silence kills passion faster than anything else. When you don't talk about intimacy, assumptions fill the space, and assumptions are almost always wrong. Here's the truth: men are not mind readers. Women aren't either. You could be quietly fantasizing about something, thinking he would never go for it, while he's lying there thinking the exact same thing about you. Both of you silent, both of you unsatisfied, both of you missing the fire that could bring you closer. So how do you open the door without making it heavy? You make it playful, you make it curious. You make it feel like an invitation, not an interrogation. For example, you could casually say, if you could try one thing in bed without anyone ever judging you, what would it be? That's a light, fun, and non-threatening way of asking. Or during intimacy, you could whisper, what's something you've always wanted me to do to you? Notice how different that feels than a sit-down, serious, we need to talk about sex. It's teasing, it's inviting, it's exciting. And here's the psychology behind it. When you ask these questions playfully, you remove the fear of shame. Shame is the biggest reason men hide their desires. They worry you'll think less of them. But if you create a vibe of fun curiosity, his brain feels safe. He feels like this is a game you're playing together, not a courtroom where he's being judged. The second point was pacing. And this one is huge because nothing kills intimacy faster than rushing. Too many couples either move too fast, which freaks one person out, or too slow, which makes the other person lose interest. But pacing isn't about speed, it's about rhythm. It's about building anticipation. Take Domination, for example. If you suddenly show up in leather and chains when you've never once hinted at taking control, he may panic. But if you start small, say by holding his wrist down playfully while you kiss him, suddenly it feels natural. It's not a giant leap, it's a small step. And once he enjoys that, maybe next time you blindfold him or you take charge of how things start, one step leads to the next. And before you know it, you've created a new dynamic without ever feeling forced. Pacing is powerful because it mirrors how attraction itself works. Nobody falls in love overnight. It's the gradual build, the little moments, the layering of tension and excitement that makes it irresistible. The same is true for exploring fantasies. If you build slowly, you keep the mystery alive. You keep him guessing what's next. And men love to be kept on their toes. Now, reciprocity. Let's get real. Too many women think intimacy is about pleasing him. Too many men think intimacy is about pleasing her. And the truth is, intimacy is about both. If you become the woman who only ever gives without ever asking for what you want, you're not building intimacy, you're building a performance. And performances always end in exhaustion. Reciprocity means bringing your own desires to the table. It means saying, this is what I fantasize about, or here's something that turns me on. And here's the psychology: when you share your desires, you give him permission to share his. He sees that you're brave enough to be vulnerable, and it makes him brave too. It creates balance. He doesn't feel like he's the only one risking rejection. Instead, he feels like the two of you are teammates, co-adventurers, exploring new territory together. For example, if he shares that he's turned on by the idea of role play, you could say, that's hot. And you know what I've always thought about? Suddenly, you've opened the door both ways. And when he feels that reciprocity, stops being about what can I get from her and starts being about what can we give each other, that's when intimacy explodes into something new. The fourth point was playfulness, and this might be the most underrated one of all. Because let's face it, sex is messy. It's not always a Hollywood scene. Sometimes you laugh, sometimes things don't work, sometimes it's awkward. But here's the key: if you approach it with seriousness, those moments feel like failures. If you approach it with playfulness, those moments feel like fun. Think about trying something new, like talking dirty. The first time you do it, you might feel silly. He might laugh. But if you both embrace that silliness, if you both lean into the play, it becomes hot instead of embarrassing. You start to enjoy the learning curve. And that's shared laughter, that's intimacy, that's connection. It's you saying, what don't have to be perfect to enjoy this, we just have to be in it together. Playfulness also lowers the stakes. When you take the pressure off of having to get it right, you actually give yourselves permission to explore more boldly. Because the worst that happens is you laugh. And laughter, by the way, is an aphrodisiac. It relaxes the body, releases tension, and creates joy, which is the perfect state for passion to grow. And finally, trust. This is the bedrock. Without trust, none of the 6 fantasies we talked about can thrive. Trust means you can both say no without fear of judgment. Trust means you can both experiment without worrying about it being used against you later. Trust means you know deep down that no matter what happens in that space, You're safe. Here's the thing most people don't realize: men long for trust just as much as women do. He may not say it out loud, but he craves knowing that you won't shame him for what he desires, that you won't see him differently for what turns him on. When he feels that trust, he opens. When you feel that trust, you relax. And when both of you are open and relaxed, that's when the most powerful, intimate, life-changing sex happens. So let's bring it all together. These 6 fantasies: domination, praise, roleplay, risk, taboos, and being desired, are not about being weird or there. They're about being human. They're about the deep universal needs every man carries: trust, validation, freedom, adventure, acceptance, reassurance. When you see them through that lens, you stop being afraid of them. You stop judging them. You start using them as doorways to deeper intimacy. And when you approach them with the 5 principles: communication, pacing, reciprocity, playfulness, and trust, you turn those doorways into a playground, a place where you both feel free, alive, connected. Now let me leave you with this. Men don't want women who will do everything. They want women who will explore something. It's not about how far you go. It's about how open you are. It's about whether you make him feel safe enough to be real, brave enough to express, and lucky enough to have you as his partner. Because when a man finds that with you, he stops fantasizing about what's out there and starts cherishing what's right in front of him. So my challenge to you is simple. Pick one of these principles and practice it this week. Maybe it's communication. Maybe it's playfulness. Maybe it's just telling him unapologetically how much you want him. Do that one thing and watch what happens. Watch how his eyes light up. Watch how his energy shifts. Watch how your intimacy transforms. Because at the end of the day, being unforgettable in bed isn't about tricks. It's not about toys or techniques. It's about connection. It's about trust. It's about giving him something no one else has the courage to give the space to be fully, unapologetically, passionately himself. And when you give him that, he'll never forget you. He'll never let you go. And he'll never stop craving you in and out of the bedroom. That's the real secret. And now it's in your hands.